Welcome to Tom LoBianco Reports, Episode 3. We are going to the heartland, to Indiana, the crossroads of America. As we get fired up, I'll wait for folks to hop on in before I hit us with the big thought right at the top. Producer Ian Walters and I were talking about this just a minute ago. I don't want to preempt it before we have so many folks here. Reminder, if you don't already, subscribe to 24site.news. Make sure you get our show notes every morning before we go live every day at noon. If you miss us, maybe you're watching this right now on Political Voices Network over on YouTube. You can catch that every day at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay. So we're talking about redistricting today. The White House is talking about redistricting. Everybody is talking about redistricting. Normally, this is the province of nerds. And, if you're watching this, probably a hardcore politics nerd. Normally, this is something we only talk about every 10 years. As we've noted many times here in the nascent Tom LoBianco Reports, Episode 3 here today, these are not normal times. This is highly abnormal. And that's why we have President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, going around to basically every Republican state imaginable where this is something that can be done, where this is a process not governed by independent commissions, state Supreme Courts, where it is something governed by the state politicians, the state lawmakers, where Republicans have control, and pressing them to redo their maps in the middle of the decade. Now, why? Was a crucial insight from Ian. And the more I think about it, the more shocked I am. Why would you go after one congressional seat in deep red Indiana? What is the purpose of that? Why would you shake everything up just for one seat? Hey, what is the purpose of that? Maybe because it's the entire ballgame for Trump. Here's what I mean. The margins in the House are pretty narrow right now. Republicans don't have a strong grip on the House of Representatives at all. It would not take very many flips in the 2026 midterms, which I would note are only 14 months away. That sounds like a long time from now, but really we're getting into the middle of the elections right now, especially after Labor Day. Democrats flip just a few seats, let alone an entire blue wave, as would be normal in a midterm election, in the opposition party versus the presidential party. Basically the end of the Trump presidency. Could be. Here's what I mean by that. Try to imagine, it won't be Nancy Pelosi, obviously, this time, but try to imagine Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker, Jamie Raskin back as the House Oversight Chair. Probably not Nadler, maybe, but Democrat top the House Judiciary Committee. Try to think about what that's going to look like for the Trump White House. I think, given everything that we are witnessing now, there would be at least one impeachment, potentially starting immediately. Guarantee lots of congressional oversight. Could even be department agency heads going through impeachment, something that we witnessed in the House Republicans under Comer and Jim Jordan when Biden was in office. Okay, there could be endless impeachments, endless impeachments. Potentially, that would be the end of the Trump White House. Now, I will note, since things are so crazy as it is, okay, we started here on Monday talking about what if Trump doesn't leave. All right, now, 2 days later, we're talking about what if it's the end of his presidency? Could be. And they are certainly behaving that way. So this is why, for folks who know me, if you're watching this, you know me, you know I've been covering Indiana politics a long time. Even here in the nation's capital, I run away from Indianapolis and I can't get away. Okay. Always and forever covering Indiana politics. Let me show you this map right here. And guys, I want to mention something. We're doing something new here today. I'm not going to be reading through the comments as we go because, frankly, I live in the comments. All right, and I'm going to get stuck in the comments, and I want to say hey to everybody. All right, like I can't. I'm not going to be able to focus and get us rolling. If you have comments, all right, or questions, number one, you can always reply to the morning email. We'll see that. Okay. Secondly, drop it down here if you're watching us live on Substack. All right, drop it down here live in the Substack chat. Ian is going to be reading and pulling out comments, and then we'll take a little bit of time at the end of today's show, go through them, try to answer as many questions as we can. All right, share the love. Let everybody know we do this 5 times a week, every weekday, live on Substack at noon. And then the replay is at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on YouTube on the Political Voices Network. Okay, so why would the President of the United States care about one single congressional seat in Indiana, where the Republicans already have a 7-2 majority? I mean, they basically already control almost everything in the state. All right, like it's a pretty strong hold on things. Okay, why? Here is most recent map. Okay, for folks who are not Hoosiers, I'm gonna take you through this here. You got Southern Indiana, all right, Indianapolis, Fort Wayne up here, South Bend, Notre Dame, former Mayor Pete Buttigieg territory of years past. Here, the region. The exurbs and suburbs of Chicago, the long forgotten suburbs of Chicago. Okay. Why would you focus there? Well, to do this, the reason you focus there is because if you look at the last presidential or the last congressionals in Indiana, the presidential this past November, okay, go all over the map. Things are so gerrymandered to begin with, all right, that for almost every race that you had, it was basically a 2-1 margin. All right. Here, I'll take you through, all right, the South Bend district. Rudy Yakum is 63% to 34% for the Democrat there. All right. Marlon Stutzman up in Fort Wayne, 65% Republican to 31% Democrat. Jim Baird, Indiana's 4th district, 65% to 31% Democrat. Victoria Sparks, that actually was a little bit closer. Victoria Sparks, always a show woman. Lots going on there. 56% to 38%. That's down in the suburbs of Indianapolis. Let's go to the one seriously safe Democratic seat, which is in the core of Indianapolis, Marion County, Indiana. Andre Carson, who you may note does a lot with UAPs and UFOs. And for loyal viewers of 24 Site News, I very often have on Matt Laszlo, who writes about this stuff and talks very often with Andre Carson. So we'll have to get to that in another show. Here's Andre Carson, safe Democratic seat, 68% to 29% for the Republican there. Okay. Where's it close? There's one seat where it's close. Indiana's 1st district. up in the region, up near Chicago. Okay. Frank Mervan, 53.4%. I believe that's Rick Niemeyer, former state lawmaker, ran in this 45%. By modern partisan highly gerrymandered standards, that is really tight. And you could move this. Let's go back to the map. Okay. This is an easy thing to do. You could pull down you can pull down a little bit south to add more Republican votes. You could pull over a little bit. I'm looking at this in reverse here. Let me double check. Let's go east. Probably have to go south. You don't want to go into St. Joseph County. You can't go that way. Go down here. All right. Go down a little bit south to add enough Republican votes to make it, if not competitive, you could actually make this thing a safe, lean Republican seat. Okay, so this is all of the framing I'm putting here to note this is why the White House has been harping on Indiana for weeks now. This is why Vice President J.D. Vance flew out to Indianapolis about 3.5 weeks ago. All right, met with the governor out there, Mike Braun, former U.S. Senator, very tight with Trump and his people. All right, this is why they had all these Indiana state lawmakers, the state legislative leadership here in Washington, where I am. I'm in Silver Spring, just north of Washington. This is why they had them here this week, all right, to come meet with them. And this is why we're talking about it. Because if the House flips Democratic and the margins are so narrow, that's it, potentially. I don't want to overstate it. I'm a reporter. I'm a journalist. This is Tom LoBianco Reports, and you follow the facts, all right? But you also don't want to miss the severity of the moment, all right? And this is why Trump is doing this. This is why he's pushing places like Texas, trying to get as much as he can. This is why you have Gavin Newsom fighting back out in California, saying, all right, you want to toss out 5 Democrats, we're going to toss out, or try, they have a different process out there, try to toss out 5 Republicans. Okay. Now, what's going on? If you get the morning newsletter, I wrote this very, very firmly, tongue in cheek, on purpose. And, these are pretty heavy things in the future of our democracy. Who's going to be the president, whether there will be any accountability for actions taken in office, just some light things. All right. But I do try to keep it a little humorous, a little bit light. Got up early this morning. Here is a flock of gerrymanders. That is the original Eldridge Gerry district up in Northeast Massachusetts. Okay, that is the original salamander of a district drawn up. I think there's like Newburyport, some other places up there, Haverhill, Methuen, up along the line going up to Maine and New Hampshire. All right, this is what we're talking about when we talk about gerrymandering. Of course, there's the White House. There's a process. There's an art to this. Okay, and I just couldn't shake this image in my head after I got up this morning. I was writing this, got up around 5 a.m. It's still dark, poured out 8 cups of coffee into the giant thermos. And I'm just sitting there, and I cannot lose this image. If you're a Hoosier, I imagine there's a number of Hoosiers listening right now, or if you watch Guy Fieri, all right, you know this, okay? The Indiana, basically the state sandwich. I don't know if it's the official state sandwich, but it might as well be the state sandwich. Is the pork tenderloin. Okay. It's delicious. All right. And kind of like the famous place to go to is this place called the Mug and Butt. All right. And Guy Fieri I think it was like 2011 or 2012, did an episode of Diners, Dives, and Drive-In where he goes there and he goes through the process of making this pork tenderloin. And this is why I called this tender cuts of the heartland. All right. To get to what you want for that delicious sandwich, there's a 2-step process. The first step is beating the living crap out of the pork tenderloins, all right, with a meat tenderizer. But the second part is bathing it in egg and buttermilk wash, breading, whatever proprietary seasoning blend you're putting together. I was actually, if I if I'd done some grocery shopping before this, I might have actually gone out and done this myself before we went live today. It looks delicious. All right. I've never made one myself out when I was living out there. I always used to go out and buy them. All right. A very appropriate allegory here for how the White House, President Trump and JD Vance have been handling the Indiana Republicans in this process. Okay. I was talking with somebody about the meeting that happened yesterday at the White House. All right. So there was it was a two-track meeting. All right. So there's the state legislative leaders who will have to wrangle the votes in the White House. Okay. But then across the street in the executive office building where the vice president's office is, which used to be occupied by former Vice President Mike Pence, is now occupied by JD Vance. That's where he hosts a meeting for, I think it was like 55 state Republicans, something like that. Ostensibly, right, what's the window dressing on this is talking policy. All right. But at the end of the meeting, according to my sources here, they talk about this. Now, I will note at that meeting, that was more of a buttermilk bath, all right, for the pork tenderloin. All right. That was soft. It was nice. It was, hey, we're going to support you. All right. We want to do this well. Okay. We want to make sure that everybody's happy. We want to get this across the finish line, which is a little bit different than a couple weeks ago when you had Trump's deputies, his political field operation run by Charlie Kirk, who is basically the Trump field operation, and in some ways is kind of usurped the old the Republican National Committee operations. It's been kind of outsourced to Charlie Kirk, whopping on Indiana Republicans on social media a few weeks ago. All right, really pressuring them. So there's that meat tenderizer we were talking about. Okay. This is big. It's actually this is what I love about reporting. That's why I do this. The deeper you go into a story, the more you understand the stakes. And I will say that I did not entirely grasp this myself at the outset of this. It's why, it's why we go digging, trying to understand this stuff. Talking with Ian, man, we do this every day before we go on air. We talk about, all right, what are we looking at here? All right, what's going on? Okay. And man, just hit me. I was like, wow, that could be the end of the presidency. In effect, they'd spend the next 2 years wrapped up in very serious investigations. All right. Potentially. All right. A lot on the line here. Let me give you a little bit of history, and then we're going to go to the questions here because I want to hear from you guys. Indiana used to be fairly well balanced, ironically, between Democrats and Republicans, and a lot of this has to do with the national realignment that's been going on. You had a lot of Southern Democrats, people along the Ohio River near Kentucky, legacy Democrats. They call them out there. They call them butternut Democrats. All right, who were still voting Democratic. Used to have a lot of races down in the 9th district, down in the legendary, you'd go on decades further past, they used to call it the bloody 8th down in Evansville. It used to switch parties so often. All right. There used to be a pretty good balance of these things, even up in South Bend, where, it wasn't that long ago that you had Joe Donnelly, who was the congressman from up there representing the 2nd district, and then ultimately ran and won the U.S. Senate seat in 2012 before losing to Mike Braun, the current governor, in 2018. Okay. So there was a history before. Now, that's changed a lot over the last 10, 12, 14 years. Okay. There's been a massive realignment. And a lot of that does have to do with Indiana's 1st district, too, with a lot of blue collar union voters up there moving more towards Trump. Okay. Interesting footnote I add in here. there was the current Indiana Attorney General, used to be the Secretary of State years ago, actually tried to curb partisan gerrymandering. His name is Todd Rokita. Okay, and he tried to put through a different plan. All right, basically saying like, okay, you know what, you can't take into account political data when you're doing this because as much as it is clear that this is politics, all right, it's still technically a formal government process. It has to go through a legislative process. And for those not steeped in this stuff, what would have to happen, assuming that this does happen, is the Indiana governor would call a special session and would call them in. My understanding is that they can only do a congressional map. They would not have to redo all their different state house and state senate maps, and then they would vote on it, and then it would go into effect, assuming no lawsuits. Okay, there, safe bet there will be lawsuits. Okay. Well, now, so Todd Rokita back in the day was saying, "Hey, we don't want to do this partisan stuff." And Rokita, of course, is a longtime Indiana Republican. He was saying, "We don't want any of this stuff." Now he's like, you know what? There's problems with the census. He doesn't like the census in 2020. My friend and Nikki Kelly, who was the editor of the Indiana Capitol Chronicle, longtime Indiana reporter, we used to work together at the State House. As she noted that Rokita recently has said that he had concerns with the census numbers being unfair. Not explicitly that he's in favor of this, but kind of inching in that direction. Similar with Braun and a number of other Republicans, not putting their cards on the table, all standard fare. So where do things stand now? Now we got to watch. Now we got to watch to see if Indiana is the latest state to enter the redistricting wars. Okay, look, they already had Texas. All right, they already had the Texas Democratic walkout. All right, all this, this is happening all across the country right now. It is a priority for the White House. Okay, now we're watching to see one congressional district could make the entire difference. So, all right, guys, I'm going to go to the questions here. Let me see if you got questions, comments, pop them in here. We'll try to we'll get to them. Ian sending them to me right now. We have a very orderly process. Here we go. All right, Alex Littlefield, what's up, dude? Hey, man, how's it going? Corey Emberson, they know they'll lose big. You think, Corey? Do you think Texas and the other GOP hyper gerrymandered districts, disillusioned GOP voters can flip Democrat, or the D's can break out of their non-voting patterns and break the gerrymandering grip? Good question. Let me do, you know what? So here's some polling that was released on public sentiments in Indiana, but I would tell you that this is largely reflective of national sentiments on this. Okay. Support for redistricting. Down here, this is from Change Research. Okay. Strongly opposed, 43%, somewhat opposed, 9%, somewhat support, 15%, strongly support, 18%. I'm sorry, somewhat support, 16, 18. So that's 34 on the support versus 52 opposed, with a lot of gray area in the middle, not sure, 15%. I was talking with a source earlier this morning about this, and we're getting through this. It really could, depending upon what kind of motivating factors we see. Now, we are 14 months out from the midterms, which can seem like a lifetime, but a lot has happened, and you certainly see a lot of energy among Democratic voters. I think it depends on whether people are cognizant of this. And this kind of goes back to something that we saw after the last election, all right, the presidential, which is people getting information from silos. All right. Does it break through into their algorithm? All right. I don't know. I'm not sure. Now, there is a kind of a tyranny of the algorithm that's happening right now. But I will note, and you've seen this a little bit with Joe Rogan, a little bit. All right, don't want to go overboard here, where he's starting to question a lot of the ICE enforcement. All right, this brutality, this brutalism on the streets, this illegality, really, that's going on, and the way that they're presenting themselves, the way they're snatching people. We've seen some very good reporting by Kyle Cheney over Politico, number of other justice reporters. My friend Adam Klassfeld here on Substack does a great All Rise News, have been writing about the Trump's federal prosecutors, since he has taken over the Justice Department and eliminated any sense of independence that used to be there professionally, losing indictments. They lost an indictment with the Subway sandwich guy, the one who threw the sandwich at the agents. I think I put it on social media. Shane Harris over at New York Times tweeted, that old joke. A good lawyer can indict a ham sandwich. Apparently, you can't. That was pretty good. um, let's see. Okay, Jody says, "Do not see a way to put this authoritarian MAGA regime, and it scares me." Yeah, with you, Jody. Look, this is it's new. All right. And some of it is performative, some of it is real action. All right, my industry, the media industry, is under attack. The news industry, I would note, not just media, but the news industry itself as a profession, which is in the Constitution, First Amendment, called the fourth estate for a reason, under attack from the second branch of government, the White House, constantly. Okay, so yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. Okay. So you said, where are the Republicans? Jody says, where are the Republicans with integrity that can stand up to Trump and Project 2025? Some are still in there. There's still, a little bit of that. You lost all the guardrails, most of the guardrails that had sort of been these institutional norms, which we used to have, not least of which was Mike Pence himself in the first term. Jim Mattis, all right, Mark Milley, John Bolton, who just, by most accounts, what certainly looks like a politicized, investigation, a weaponization of the Justice Department against John Bolton. I would note they say that it's not the case, but you can make your own judgment on that. A lot of those folks are gone. A lot of those folks switched Democratic. Never Trump movement still going strong. Okay. A lot of folks staying home. A lot of the Republicans unhappy with this stuff, just not saying anything. But I would note too, you've seen a lot of Republicans change over the last 10 years. All right. And really get on board with this stuff. Okay. And you bring up Project 2025. Trump's enacting long-running conservative policies. All right. Project 2025, was the document which was talked about most extensively, but the formal name of this thing, Mandate for Leadership. I saw that Ed Follner, the founder of the Heritage Foundation, died like a week ago, I think. This goes all the way back to the early 80s when Reagan took office, Mandate for Leadership. So now it's evolved significantly, but he's doing a lot of this stuff. All right. So a lot of people like this. All right. A lot of veteran Republicans like this stuff, even if they're not very vocal about it. Okay. I would look to the independents, frankly. I was looking at some polling, and we'll do this for another show coming up. I was looking at some polling out of Virginia, and the Virginia elections are right at our doorstep here. Right? Things are really heating up down there in November, where you have just a drop off in support for Republicans, at least for Winsome Earl Sears, the gubernatorial candidate, among independent voters in Virginia. I think it was Coefficient Polling, which just came out with that. So there's a lot in play right now. So here's what I'm going to say, guys. let me just make sure didn't miss anything here. One more question. There we go. That's all right. Yeah, thank you, Ian. Lana asked, I'm curious if it's inevitable that Republicans will beat Democrats in the numbers game around this mutually assured redistricting. Um, yes, is the short answer. I don't have enough numbers at hand right now, and I suspect Ian and I were talking about this before hopping on air, that this seems like something we should be following. So probably doing some more shows, maybe more state specific shows as we go through this. Um, but generally speaking, the Democratic states, Democratic majority states, tend to have more of these quote unquote nonpartisan commissions, state courts involved in the redistricting. More Republican states have more Republican dominant states, right? Have these still the political process. So, in terms of gerrymandering, yeah, Republicans certainly have the edge here. Um, all right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm Tom LoBianco. This is Tom LoBianco Reports. Head on over to 24site.news. All right. If you're not already subscribed, sign up. Get the newsletter in the morning with all the details, what we're talking about. All right. If you missed us here live today at noon on Substack, maybe you're listening over on the YouTube for Political Voices Network. All right. Our friends over there put together a really nice video. That looked pretty good. All right. Straight to camera like this, but it always looks nice to have some real production behind it. Okay. You can always catch us over there at 8 p.m. And then make sure to sign up for both. Tomorrow, we're going to Iowa. All right. We're going to talk about what's happening with the Democrats out in Iowa. If you got questions, you can shoot them. You can reply to my email that I send out every morning. You reply to the 24 Site News email. I'll get it. All right. We'll put it together. If you got questions about what's going on with the Democrats out in Iowa, shoot them on over. All right. And thanks, guys. Appreciate you. We'll see you tomorrow live at noon on Substack, 8 p.m. YouTube Political Voices Network for the replay. Peace.